Hello guys, welcome back to Not Just Maker, it's Marco here, and today we talk about Blanchitsu. John Blanche is a great illustrator and model maker, and in the last 30 years he really shaped the aesthetic of GW universe. His style is one of the most unique in the miniature world, not only in artworks but also in miniatures. And it's so unique and so well known between modelers that has his own name, Blanchitsu. The whole point of Blanchitsu, for me as a fanatic painter, is to bring on a model all the character, the storytelling and the mood of my favorite artworks. Today, Blanchitsu is quite a complex reality. It's not only about the style, it's also about converting and storytelling, and recently became something quite big thanks to the articles on White Dwarf, the guys behind Ironsleet 28 magazine, and the community of Inquisitor 28, and of course Age of Sigmar 28. Yeah, I'm a huge fanboy, I admit it, and I love this topic, but I really want to stick on painting on this video, so you'll find a bunch of links down below in the description, meant to lead you properly into this grimdark world. I like in particular the work of Blanche on sketches and concept art. And what I'm going to show you today in this step-by-step is my way to use a similar fast and sketchy technique for miniature painting. The whole idea is to follow not only the colors and the general style, but also the approach and the mindset to quickly create a cool model full of character. So, here I'm ready with my Tech Priest Dominus, everything is built up and cleaned, and I give it a fancy Sector Mechanicus base. Obviously, an essential part of Blanchitsu philosophy is about converting and personalizing the models, but I wanted to maintain this tutorial simple and all about painting. Working on a model built out of the box and that everybody knows. For the same reason, I didn't add extra textures and three-dimensional effects like solid rust or grime. There is already a lot of stuff to say only about painting, so I want to keep these topics for future videos and give them their proper space. As usual, let's start priming the model. Here I want a solid black coat because later we'll apply some really aggressive techniques, so everything has to be really well sealed. I like to prime my models using the airbrush and Molotov paints. But you can use really everything from spray cans to standard brush. And don't worry, in a future video I'm going to talk in detail about these incredible colors. Time for a solid coat of silver on all the mechanical and metal parts. Here I'm using Duraluminium by Vallejo from the Metal Color series, really fluid, really good for the airbrush, but you can use any kind of light silver, really doesn't matter. I'm not also concerned about overspraying other parts of the model because I cover every mistake in the next step, so really easy. Again, this is a speed painting approach, so once you know what to do, the main goal of these first phases is to be fast and efficient. Ready for the last step with the airbrush. It's just solid titanium white, covering all the parts of the robe and also the skin, at least the few skin you have on this model. And a solid option, if you are really in a hurry, it's to prime your model directly in white and maybe paint only the silver parts. But I prefer to have a black undercoat for my metal colors, and this way I have also an extra layer of color to increase the general resistance of my paint job. And here, really easily, I'm going to retouch the silver around the edges and in all the parts where the white went out of its borders. As you have seen, I use the airbrush only to give a couple of solid coats of paint, so really you can do everything with a simple brush. It's just a matter of preferences and habits. So, after this basic preparation work, it's time for the real star of this technique: oil colors. Nowadays, it's rare to find figure painters still using oil paint, especially in this kind of scale. We have now access to high-quality acrylics with really fine pigments, and thanks to wet palettes that are a big deal, we can mix and work colors in a similar fashion to oils, using just simple water and making everything, at least apparently, simpler and faster. Oils may not be so common in the miniature community, but they are still a great tool in larger scales to achieve really fast and awesome blendings. They are still a big deal in military modeling for weathering in general, and they are also used in the Gundam modeling for precise panel lining and stuff like this. Sadly, these worlds are still quite divided, and the majority of modelers doesn't cross the hard border between them. But I assure you, there are a ton of crazy techniques that you can steal from different styles of modeling. So, here I have my oils. I have black, burnt umber, orange, a dark green, and of course, as solvent, I have odorless white spirit. The brand is not really important. Every kind of oil color is good for this kind of approach. So you don't need fancy stuff for this technique. With these tones, we are going to create thick washes for our model. Remember always to use a synthetic brush, because white spirit easily destroys natural bristles, and also a metal or glass container for your mixes, because white spirit doesn't like some kind of thin plastics. And now we are going to apply these thick washes directly on the model. As you can see, we are looking for something consistent, but still definitely liquid. I'll start with black on the metallic parts and burnt umber on the robe. Later I'll add some green on the edges to create the feel of a bit of grime, and brown and orange on metals to give just a touch of rust. You don't need to be precise on this phase, just let the colors to flow on the model. This mix has a very low surface tension, so it's easy to catch all the details and crevices. When you are satisfied with the application of your colors, grab an hairdryer. White spirit evaporates really quickly, but with the extra heat you can gain obviously extra speed. But more important, thanks to the fast drying time, at the end the colors will be super matte. The surface now may seem dry, but the colors are still active and playable, and they will remain like this for hours. This is the beauty of working with oil colors, and this is the key for our next steps. For the next step, we just need a container, white spirit, a bunch of Qtips, and a couple of old synthetic brushes. I admit that now the model seems just a big mess, really beyond redemption. But with the oil paint's magic, this step will give in few minutes character and definition to the model. The idea is to gently rub the surface with the Qtips. The Qtips will be soaked in white spirit, not too much, just a bit of white spirit, removing all the excess of color. Oils will remain active for hours, so we are definitely not in a hurry, and we have all the time to go back and forward to add and remove stuff. Using Qtips is a very easy way to take off only the superficial layer of colors, leaving perfect details and sharp black lines all around the edges, just because their shape doesn't arrive deep in the crevices. In the meanwhile, you are creating without any effort interesting lines, textures, and build-up in the deepest recesses. This is a bit more than a simple oil wash, because I don't use it only for definition, but also to stain the surface, giving extra tones and to create interesting movement, and also details on the surface at the same time. To perfectly catch all the details, try to keep the Qtips perpendicular to the surface, and to create textures and something like strikes here on the robe, just follow the sculpt, follow your shapes, working top to bottom, to create the idea of dirt and grime dripping by gravity, and the feel of the fine brush strokes of a blanch sketch. Just a quick note here, remember that you can always go back in the previous phases, adding new layers and different tones. It's really a dynamic and fun process, so don't worry if you put too much color or if you were too aggressive in the rubbing phase. You have really all the time to correct and change everything in every step with this kind of technique. So, the general effect is already in place, and you can see how every surface is now much more interesting and full of movement. And in real time, I'm still under 15 minutes of work, so big bonus here. Now, to enhance the grimy and dirty effect even more, I'm going to add mud splatters and random dots here and there, just to fill the space with details and to give to the viewer something interesting to see all around the model. On this model in particular, I prefer to have more control, but you can also use the airbrush or a brush with rigid bristles to create real splatters. In this step, I use a pure ink, it's Skin Wash by Vallejo Game Inks, to change the tone of little metallic elements here and there all around the model. Thanks to its transparency, I don't lose details, even working on top of an almost finished surface. And since it's a bit glossy, it maintains the shiny finish of the metal parts. With all our details in place, now it's time to play with pigments to add the iconic reddish tones of Blanch style. Using a really old brush with short bristles, I rub the pigments on the bottom part of the robe to loosely set the borders of my rusty weathering. I always try to move the brush following the shapes of the sculpt to mimic the real movement of this kind of dirt and to blend a bit the edges of the effect. After the application, you need only to blend the rusty powder with the rest of the paint job, using the brush dumped in white spirit, or using again Qtips like in the first steps with oils, gently rubbing the surface. Also, this step, it's really forgiving and easy to do, so you can go back and forward adding or removing pigments till you reach the perfect effect you want. On the base, I use the exact same technique, applying freely the pigments on the surface and adding also a bit of white dust to the mix. I want the base to be really covered in rust and dust, so I just need to remove a bit of the excess, gently dabbing with a Q-tip, only where I feel the need to control a bit the flow of the pigments. In this last step, I used Tamiya Clear Red diluted with Airbrush Thinner, but you can use also isopropyl alcohol or its official thinner, to give my last and extreme point of saturated and shiny red. This is something that I really like to do on these kind of models, to give the sensation of another different material and to add that one last point of interest on the model. The whole job took me 40 minutes in total in real time, 1 hour of work if you consider also the cleanup of the table. Of course, this is only one of 1,000 different approaches to Blanchitsu. Really, there aren't wrong answers in this field, just have fun, be wild and creative while doing your own art. I'm particularly happy with the robe, especially on the right side, where it really looks like one of Blanche's illustration. Again, I need to say the objective here was to catch and transfer on a three-dimensional model the essence of concept art and sketches, working in a fast, similar way, just leaving mood and guts to lead a bit the way. So it's not really a speed paint, because sometimes speed painting implies a lower quality, but I really consider this kind of style something different. Still, you can use these techniques, all the stuff I showed in this video, to paint really quickly some really grim, dark and grimy armies or warbands for your games. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember, you can always ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of these links here. See you soon, guys.